With the emulsion countermeasure deployed by Adam Phoenix, this marked the end of the Sera and Locust War. The Locusts were thought to be completely defeated as the waves of energy pulsed through their meat suits and destroyed every bit of emulsion contained within. Marcus saw to the end of their queen Mira, and with the conclusion, all would go quiet on the planet Sera for the most part. With humanity in shambles, cities destroyed, and chaos running amok, the COG leaders sought to promote procreation and order amongst its surviving members as they try to build back up their numbers from near extinction. The issue is that the locusts may be gone, but they had actually been undergoing a metamorphosis and later would become the swarm. Emerging back onto the planet some 20 years later or so, they have unleashed an entire new wave of dangerous creatures onto the planet that beckon for the chance to take down the humans. Much like with most of the creatures from the Hollow, however, many have changed, their DNA altered and recombined to form more horrible animals. However, many from the Hollow were also lost because of the light mass defensive that was utilized against them. Much like how we see on Earth when an apex predator falls, that opens up a specialization niche for another creature to evolve and take its place. Specifically in this instance, when the krill went extinct, this allowed another creature to flourish and take on many traits it may not originally have had. So before moving any further, you already know just inherently there will be some spoilers in this, so this is your last chance to get out, although I will be limiting the amount of spoilers concerning the story, but you may inadvertently see some things relating to the story simply because of footage used. Alright, you good? Okay, so today we'll be talking about the lore and biology behind the Heart Leech, or as it's known in Gears 5, the Swarm Leech, and what exactly its purpose is. So let's get to it. First thing you're all probably wondering, are the leeches new? Absolutely not. The leeches were encountered well before the events of Gears 5. In fact, they were even found before the Locust War as well. Way back in the Pendulum Wars, humanity became increasingly aware of the native creatures of the Hollow. Many of these fierce beasts lived just underground, but as long as there was plenty of earth separating humanity from these creatures, it wasn't really deemed that large of a threat. Native to the Outer Hollow specifically, this would imply that they were contending with krill in the area. Considering the amount of krill with relatively few heart leeches, it is possible that there were some interactions, but it's unknown if predator-prey interactions were common or even happened. Usually what we see in our own universe is a large amount of prey and very few predators, but I would hesitate to say that the krill were the leech's food source, as sheer lethality of the krill means that they could pick leeches apart fairly easily with their massive jaws. Leeches, however, have always been predators themselves. During a mission to Montevado, Jace and Dom walked into a leech nest. Due to the aggressive nature of these leeches, as opposed to say the rockworms who also live down in the Hollow, this would imply that these leeches are well versed in hunting for food. The leeches appear to, however, be in a much more subdued amount. The locusts favored the krill because of this, or at least Rom did, as the krill would eat locust soldiers too, over these leeches. We never saw much of them during the Locust War, but they were definitely still present. So why did they emerge now? Again, when the krill went extinct, the leech numbers were still presumably fairly low. With less nests in the area, it's not like they would have been utilized quite like the krill were for the locusts. Instead, it became more of a waiting game that perhaps the locusts did have intentions of exploring. However, with the emulsion countermeasure used, they would run out of time to use these leeches against their mortal enemies. With the locusts reduced to crystal pods undergoing changes for an extended period of time, the leeches' numbers would continue to rise. It can be assumed at a certain point, while their numbers would never truly rival that of the smaller krill, it would be quite substantial. When the swarm finally came about, first from underground, the leeches would be the first organic creatures they would use. Later, the swarmax and other species would be utilized as well, but the naturally occurring leech was quite handy. It would still take time, seeing as the events of Gears 4 took place and still no leeches. So what was the purpose of using these leeches? Well, seemingly it would be more than just to overrun humanity's fighting positions. The swarm emerged leaderless, but not stupid. Humanity's numbers were still relatively low at this point, only just recovering from near extinction. As such, they relied quite heavily on mechanical creations that were initially designed to help carry the workload human workers would have if they were still around. Eventually though, these DeeBees, which if you didn't know, but honestly you probably did, are the initials for Damon Baird, because that man's ego is literally modeled after my own. These DeeBees would be used to combat the swarm with a fair amount of success. The machines were stronger than humans, and production went rather quickly to help combat these organic swarms. A combined front of human and machine would be disastrous for the swarm, so they needed a solution. This is where the leeches come into play. The leeches were a two-pronged attack on the combination forces of the COG. One was presumably intentional, the other was probably just more happenstance and a great coincidence for the swarm, which happened through interaction. Again, the leeches, or flock as they are known when they are in a massive group, are highly aggressive creatures towards anything that may smell like food, and luckily for any soldier out on the field, they have the juiciest snack in their chest, making noise and producing electrical signals that are apparently quite enticing to leeches, the human heart, which is why they're called heart leeches. case. When a flock is released on a group of cog soldiers, or really anyone, flock will immediately go for the chest, or at least the individual will. It will burst through the ribcage of that person and consume the whole heart of the person before busting back out of the host, leaving them either in pieces or completely game-ended. What I find interesting, however, is why they go for the heart at all. I mean, why would they, and how would they even find a person in the first place, as presumably, if they're anything like the other leeches, they have no eyesight? Well, strap in because it's actually time for a bio lesson. On our planet right now, there are many animals that hunt specifically via electroreception. Essentially, these are the aquatic or amphibious animals such as sharks and many other vertebrates that live in oceans or lakes or brackish water. But the point of this is that they're in the water. It's really easy for the animals to sense the electrical going-ons of a prey body, even if they do not outright see it. Usually this is not so much the case in air, as it does not travel as well, but one could imagine that living in a cave with very low light conditions, if any light actually, hunting prey by the electrical signals their body puts off would be invaluable. This is more than likely how these leeches would have hunted in the dark for any other prey creatures in the hollow. And coincidentally, what does your heart do? Well, it produces its own electrical signals, producing contractions via the SA node. This would be like yelling dinner is here just by existing. The leeches are drawn to this activity, and upon entering your meat suit, they find fairly quickly that you are incredibly edible. Sensing the electrical signals is not enough, however. To more than likely aid with the fact that the air is a poor conductor, there exists another form of finding prey: electrolocation. An electric field is produced by a specific organ in the body, which will produce a sphere of influence. Again, it should be noted that it is much better in water for this to work, but in theory, it could work in the air. So this can explain many things concerning the behaviors of the flock and how they are able to locate cog soldiers. First, the flock moves and flows like water would, instantly changing direction with no particular leader in place to guide them. The electrical field they produce would influence those around them, and the individual leech itself would be influenced by others. However, there is another consequence that this has. With a large group of leeches, the sphere of influence concerning this electrical field would be much larger, able to sense over a larger area, in fact. This means that they could find soldiers hiding and also ones that are further away. This may be why we see at certain points they will move away from you even though you're only about 15 to 25 feet away from them. You could very well be outside their sphere and they are searching, but upon getting close enough, they sense your electrical activity as well as you being inside that sphere and begin their attack. So we have discussed how they hunt and how they find you concerning human activity, but then what's the deal with the DeeBees in the flock? As we have seen, in Gears 4, not only is there a distinct lack of leeches, but the DeeBees were also not being infected. Perhaps there were less DeeBees in combat roles, or the interaction just wasn't there, but over time, as the swarm became more of a recognized threat, this would change. This would also increase the need by the swarm to develop countermeasures against the DeeBees, and for the Serans to ramp up production of the countermeasure against the swarm. Due to this, at some point, DeeBees would have finally come into contact with the swarm, as is natural out in the battlefield. When this happened, in all honesty, DeeBees were more than likely just destroyed. The leeches would have been drawn to the naturally high electric levels of the DeeBee's body, as they would have basically just been a glowing beacon. However, seeing as they are metallic, they would not have been edible to the leeches. We have seen that leeches do possess the strength in numbers to completely tear apart cog with little effort. DeeBees would have presented a little more challenge in terms of durability to the leeches. This would actually be important as it explains why they became what they are. With more time spent destroying the DeeBees, the leech's electric organs may have begun to accidentally interface with the system of these DeeBees. In fact, they may have just been able to outright control it by simply using electrolocation method via their electric organ. But I need to stress this is not indicative of higher thought even in the slightest. This appears to be more animalistic survival than an actual predisposition towards taking over a host. The leeches are social creatures as we see in their flock. Alone, or even in a flock really, each one is vulnerable to cog attacks as well as DB attacks. So gravitating towards a large machine that was producing an electrical signal originally anyways that would keep you going would be invaluable to this species. For reference, take the fish that attach themselves to the sides of sharks. If they get in front of its mouth, they are food, but if they stay close to it, larger fish stay away as they don't want to be eaten by the shark. Same concept with the leeches. They will quite literally attach themselves to larger DBs to stay alive. The consequence of doing this, however, is that they have control by corrupting the system of the DB due to the electrical potential of the flock and their body mass. So they end up becoming part of a stronger creature by taking it over. So although it is never shown outright, the electrical signals are really the main culprit as to why these leeches eat human hearts and will continue to take over a DB or a warden, which in turn will be used against the cog forces in a self-defense measure. When the leech does attack you though, what exactly are we looking at if it doesn't outright get through your osmium armor immediately or pulls you up in the air to be torn apart? apart? Well, it's the literal stuff of nightmares. The Leech is a creature roughly about 3 feet in length or about 1 meter long. Looking more like a singular piece of muscle, it appears to be just about as strong as one too. Completely capable of overpowering a beefed up cog soldier, it can go for the neck and essentially try to move down your armor towards your heart. The sides of its body are lined with large, sharp bones, would appear to help it grapple onto prey and even move across the ground towards soldiers should they break off of the flock. The skin is red and wet. This is interesting as it would imply it is amphibious, much like the leeches and frogs on Earth. The skin is stretched over the bones outwards. These would presumably be much like the ribs of other vertebrates, but it does allow this creature the ability to fly. Much like the membranous wings of a bat, the same idea can be applied here. This is how the leech is able to stay aloft and move on the ground. No eyes can be seen on the head of this creature. However, there could be a light sensing organ, much like with the other leeches who have it towards the front, but they did exist in a cave, so this is not probable. The mouth of this creature is disturbing to say the least. The mouth appears to have 4 jaws on it. 2 jaws at the top and bottom open fairly wide, with 2 more on the sides as well. Each jaw is lined with teeth that are spiky and sharp, which helps the creature eat through armor and eventually a rib cage. The jaws are quite malleable, allowing them to wrap around a heart entirely and pull in one motion, which will completely game end you in the process. There is no coming back from that. The creature's only real defense is its numbers or taking over a DB or warden socially. Alone, they are exceedingly vulnerable, but do have a last resort attack that ends in their own end. Not really a choice, more like a consequence. Should these creatures take enough damage, much like the other creatures incorporated into the swarm, it will self-detonate, causing harm to anyone in the area. Honestly, just throwing an idea out there, I mentioned in my previous video that I didn't think the emulsion was completely gone, and considering what we see with the lambent and their instability, this could be what's afflicting these creatures of the Hollow currently. The ability of the flock of leeches to move through the air and hunt down prey is only matched by the krill. They are devastating to cog soldiers, and should they get a hold of DBs, they are quickly turned into rejects and turned for the use of the swarm. The only real way to take back the rejects or wardens would be to use a powerful surge of electricity from Jack that seems to override the organic organs of the leeches, but this is not sustainable for an extended period of time, which means control is eventually returned back to the heart leech. But that is about gonna do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed. If you complain about spoilers in the comments, I swear to God, I will come down on you with the might of Zeus. If you did enjoy this, leaving a like helps the video get out there, and if you are new, I'm hoping to hit 200,000 subs by next month, so it would be awesome if you hit that sub button. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, merch, Patreon links in the description, and I would like to thank a few of my patrons: Freedom Units 44, Punish Meat, Red Cloud, and Spartan Nightglider. Thank you guys for your awesome support, and to the rest of my patrons, thank you too. You guys are cool cats. Anyhow, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see y'all in the next one.